Hello everyone, my name's Kaj and I'm a top 100 DPS player. Today I'm here to share with you 10 tips and tricks I've used to climb all the way from bronze to top 100 playing DPS. These are tips I still incorporate now and can help you regardless of what elo you are, so stick around to the end to make sure you learn the most you can. Tip number 1 is simple but essential to learning how to play DPS, and it's always strafing, jumping, crouching, and generally just moving in an unpredictable manner while shooting. There are no penalties to moving while shooting and it makes you a considerably harder target to hit regardless of what skill level you play in. Moving more also just makes your gameplay more fluid in general, allowing you to make decisions quicker and get the help faster when you inevitably need it. Standing still has no advantages and leaves you open to being assassinated by enemies with ease due to how squishy you are. You want to be a great DPS player. It's only natural to want to be the best, of course. What if I told you you could learn to be the best by clicking the link in the description below and getting a GameLeap membership? You'll instantly gain access to hundreds of in-depth guides, and I myself will be making tons of updated guides helping you learn how to play any DPS hero. These are only available on the GameLeap website, so click the link in the description below and sign up now. Tip number 2 is learning to prioritize important targets. It can be tempting to try to kill the enemy tank so that the enemy team is left defenseless, but it's nearly impossible to brute force this. Think of the enemy tank like a wall that's already super hard to break due to its armor and shielding. Now imagine this wall is also constantly being repaired, so for every brick you break, 2 more are placed. This is pretty much the reality of trying to kill the enemy tank. For example, imagine you're playing Cassidy and try to kill the enemy tank. You throw your grenade at them, shoot them with all the ammo you have, roll to automatically reload, and then shoot them with all your ammo again. After this, you've achieved nothing except wasting your grenade and 30 seconds of your time because their supports have healed them to full. A much more effective method to destroy this wall would be to stop it from being constantly repaired. This is where target prioritization comes to great importance. Think of the same combo you just used but against a squishy target. You'll likely kill them with a magnetic grenade and 2 or 3 shots, allowing you to look at another squishy target with your remaining ammo and your automatic reload. When you start causing all this pressure, the enemy tank doesn't have the resources they need to continue to stay fighting and are either killed or forced to retreat. Tip number 3 is learning to play around your team. A mistake I see a ton of low elo DPS players make is trying to constantly be the main character, going for these insane 1v5 plays they saw their favorite content creator pull off to have a lower chance of working than them winning the lottery. You have to keep in mind that you usually only have 150 to 200 HP, making you very easy to kill. This is why it's crucial you stick by your tank and supports who can provide healing and peeling when you need it, allowing for you to deal the most damage possible while remaining healthy. Imagine that you're playing Reaper. While you could play far away from your team and look to sneakily teleport in, getting a lucky pick or 2, the chances of this working are super low and overall not worth it. Instead, you can play right next to your tank and supports, allowing you to deal massive damage and consistent damage to the enemy tank who's going head to head with your tank. By doing this, you're also taking pressure off your team due to the enemy team focusing you more, but this is no problem thanks to your 35% lifesteal and your supports being so close to you that they can heal you up to full. Tip number 4 is making sure that you're positioning properly. The best way to do this is by using something that I like to call the positioning checklist. By far the biggest issue I see with low elo DPS players I coach is them having poor positioning. This skims them massively and is one of the biggest things preventing them from reaching higher elos. While having good aim and mechanics are important, you'll never get anywhere without proper positioning. If you haven't watched or didn't pay attention to tip number 3, I strongly recommend taking a look at it as it's the first step to the positioning checklist. As a DPS player, I want you to have a mental checklist before engaging in any situations. The first thing on this checklist is making sure that you're close enough to resources that can peel and heal you. If you're too far away from your tank or supports, you'll be killed instantly, leaving your team without a major source of damage and pressure. The second thing is making sure you're in your hero's effective range so you can get guaranteed damage off on key targets. Let's say your hero does 10 damage per shot from up to 10 meters away, but the damage drops by 1 per meter after 10 up to 20, making you do 0 damage at 20 meters. It's much better for you to deal 7 damage per shot from 13 meters away when you're protected by your team over 10 damage per shot from 10 meters away where you're at risk of dying. This is something that you have to learn to figure out depending on what hero you play, but a good way to find out your hero's range is by looking at the wiki for your hero. Finally, the last thing on this checklist is making sure you have a safe place to escape to if something goes wrong. Things aren't always going to go according to plan, but you don't need to say idly bye and accept that. You should always keep track of safe escape routes so you can avoid death and regroup with your team faster. Tip number 5 is staying alive and on the map for as long as possible. I get it, you're playing DPS and you feel burdened to deal as much damage as possible, which is fine, but to deal as much damage as possible, you can't constantly be respawning and walking back to the fight due to how long this takes. The respawn timer is usually 10 seconds and regrouping safely with your team takes around 15 seconds on average. This totals up to 25 seconds where your team doesn't have one of their major sources of pressure and damage. The best ways to avoid dying are to follow tips number 3 and 4 closely along with the tip that's coming next. Tip number 6 is something that DPS players really struggle with, causing them plenty of death, and that's to avoid tunnel visioning onto one target. Kills on key targets are super important, but like we've talked about in previous tips, it's best to be able to deal safe and guaranteed damage than to risk it all for something that may not even work. Tunneling onto one target is a problem even I face despite being a top 100 player. Sometimes Sometimes the enemy widow isn't letting me breathe, so I get fixated on trying to kill her, only to forget that I'm leaving myself wide open to being killed by the enemy team. And this is usually what ends up happening. I die and I'm left feeling stupid since I'm wasting time due to not being on the map. Through my experience learning to overcome this issue, the best way to avoid tunnel visioning is by constantly stopping and mentally checking yourself to see if you're tunneling onto one target. This can throw you off your gameplay, but that's alright as that's the goal. Soon, you'll learn to automatically tell when you're tunneling, causing you to avoid it once it inevitably happens. Tip number 7 is not rushing to find high ground you can poke from. I see a ton of people saying that the first thing you should do as a DPS is rush to find high grounds and poke the enemy, despite this being completely false. Mindlessly rushing to high ground is like being lost in the forest with a large group of people and running in the opposite direction of where they're going. It's completely nonsensical. It leaves you secluded since your tank wants to be near an objective and your supports want to be near your tank, leaving you completely defenseless. Taking your time to look for high ground is a much better alternative because you can follow the positioning checklist, ensuring that you get the maximum benefits from high ground, like hitting headshots easier and getting a clear view of the map while also remaining safe. Tip number 8 is learning to create pressure outside of dealing damage. I've mentioned pressure along with damage a couple times in this video, and you may be wondering what exactly pressure is, which I'll now explain. Dealing damage isn't the only way to create pressure, and there are many ways you can create pressure alongside doing damage. The easiest way is by taking attention off your team and being a big enough threat to the enemies, forcing them to focus on you. For example, if you're playing Reaper alongside your tank, the enemy team will want to focus you to take pressure off their tank. This way you can constantly be looking to bait out key enemy abilities like Sleep Dart, only to dodge them with Wraith form. Another example is if you're playing Echo and you want to create pressure for your team to push the payload forward. You can use your flight and E right click combo against a DPS, forcing them to try to get damage back on you, while also forcing at least one enemy support to divert attention from their tank to keep that DPS alive. This creates pressure on 2 out of 5 of their team members, allowing 4 members of your team to pressure the remaining 3, which will allow you to push forward. Tip number 9 is simple but effective, and that's learning to look at your scoreboard often to get as much information as possible. Anytime you have downtime and there's nothing going on, checking your scoreboard is an amazing habit to build as it gives you a large amount of information very quickly. It allows you to see ally and enemy respawn timers as well as ally ult charges. When you're constantly paying attention to things like making sure all of your teammates are alive and when your teammates have key ultimate abilities up, you can set up game-winning plays with guaranteed success. Like I said, this tip may seem simple, but there's no downsides to doing this and it can only help you better your gameplay. Tip number 10, the last and final tip, is to consistently play the game to learn and improve instead of playing to hit a certain rank. This is probably the most important tip of this entire video and is the driving reason behind me hitting top 100. When I was an Overwatch noob, I was really anxious to play comp and avoided it in fear of losing the new rank I placed in for the very first time, which was gold. Eventually, I learned that the only way I could really improve at the game is if I played to learn new things and improve at things I struggled with. All this limit testing caused me to drop from gold to bronze. While this really felt bad at first, from there I slowly started improving my fundamentals, learning new concepts, and working on things I really struggled with like positioning and tunnel visioning. After that, the rest is history. Stressing out about your current rank will only hinder you long term, so don't be afraid to play comp and have fun learning. I hope you guys learned a lot from this video, and if you want me to make any hero specific guides on the GameLeap website, let me know in the comments and I'll try to make it happen. Thanks for watching and have a wonderful day.